And one of my favorite stories I always love is a story about Felix Mendelssohn, which was a very famous composer many years ago. But it was an interesting story. When Mendelssohn was a young man, he and his wife were supported by his father, who was a banker. He owned the Bank of England. So he was the second wealthiest man in the world next to the Mendelssohns. And his father and he quarreled good-naturedly about it all the time. His father thought he should get a job in the bank like a man and make a living in a proper way. Being a musician in those days was pretty much like being a carpenter or something. It wasn't a bad avocation, but it wasn't, what you consider top-notch, like being a scientist or something today. But anyway, they argued constantly. Grudgingly, the father did pay him what would amount to $2,000-3,000 a week to support him. So he literally became a musician full-time, he and his wife both. But during the process of Mendelssohn had acquired Bach's, that's Johann Sebastian Bach, his St. Matthew Passion. He'd acquired this score from Bach when he was alive, and they couldn't find the title page. But it didn't matter, he bought the whole thing anyway, but he wanted to produce this. And shortly after that, Bach passed away. And of course, Bach was an extremely poor man. They had 21 children, that sort of thing. And he wrote mountains of music. He wrote enough music, manuscript, mind you, all with a pen and quill, to fill this room 2 or 3 times, floor to ceiling. Just a tremendous amount of music. So when he died, his wife sold a lot of his manuscript paper, because they were so poor, to the butcher shop and used it for wrapping paper. Well, Mendelssohn was going home one day. They stopped at the butcher shop to buy some pork chops for dinner, and the pork chop was wrapped in the title page of the St. Matthew's Passion, so he was thrilled to death. You can still see it in the British Museum now with the imprint of the pork chop on it. But anyway, he got this. So now he had the complete score of Bach's St. Matthew's Passion. So he wanted to produce the score, which means, of course, you'd have to copy the parts, the orchestra parts, hire a symphony to play it and everything, which would amount to, in today's money, $50,000. So he went to his dad and he says, I want to produce perform this music. I want to hire the musicians and so forth. Well, his dad says, well, we can't afford that. He says, that's ridiculous. And so he told his father, he said, well, after all, we can afford it. He says, and his father says, well, next to the Mendelssohns, we're poor. He said, next to the Mendelssohns, anybody's poor. So his father finally did give in, and they produced the St. Matthew's Passion. But the point of this story is, when Mendelssohn was alive, he was an up-and-coming, struggling composer and musician. Just run-of-the-mill. You might find him living in some obscure place like Colorado Springs, for example. He wasn't a national figure. But his father was a very famous man and the second wealthiest man in the country, equivalent to Bill Gates today. And of course, after they passed away, now nobody knows anything about his father. They don't think about it anymore. And Mendelssohn now is, of course, received lifelong fame as a composer. But it was very interesting because of the recognition of the two individuals varied after the deaths of both of them. But most people today don't know who Mendelssohn's father were. I bet you guys don't know. Well, it's really interesting, but it's surprising how they have changed. The father, when they were alive, was very famous and very well known and world famous. And Mendelssohn was just a starving musician, but now the title